Yo, what's going on? Today, I'm going to sit down with my coaches, Sage and Sandy of Higher Running, and we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into what happened and what went down at the London Marathon. We'll go over what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and also do a little bit of a look back at the last training block and look forward to what's going to be happening coming in the future. I feel like it's a really helpful kind of way of looking at how coaches can work with athletes in trying to troubleshoot little things that ended up being a big problem on what should have been a really successful running day. So we'll get a little bit of a peek into that kind of relationship. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. We don't go too deep into any one particular set of metrics. If you want to take a look at things deeper, I'll post links to the Strava activity from my race, and also I'll post links to the race video that I made, as well as the runner's weekend video, which also talks a little bit further about what was going on in my head at the time of the race, so you can get a little bit more detail there. We didn't talk too much about the tech or the shoes that I was wearing either. And so I will be addressing that in a later video because I did get the Metaspeed Sky Paris to 100 miles with the completion of this race. And spoiler alert, the shoe was great. It had nothing to do with the shoes. I really enjoyed running in them, and I would choose them again for another PB attempt if I had to do it all over again. But hopefully this coaching call, which kind of wraps up the London series, is going to be helpful for you guys. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream I do Monday through Friday over the Kofuzi Run Club channel, where I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. But for now, please enjoy this conversation with my coaches, Sage and Sandy. Hey, Sage and Sandy, thanks for taking time to sit down with me after the London Marathon so we could break it down and kind of talk about what I experienced and what I'm thinking and what you guys see from your end as coaches. And I know you guys just got back from a camping trip too, so thanks again for taking some time for me.
Yeah, of course. It's great to chat with you again, and I'm excited to hear about your experience.
Yeah, honored to be here, and let's dig into the details.
All right, so I think, even though this will be on my channel, but I think what would probably make more sense for everyone else is if you guys kind of drove the conversation a little bit in terms of how you would normally interact with one of your athletes after a race, one that they have been working towards and it didn't quite go the way they wanted to, and like what kind of troubleshooting you guys are doing or what kind of discussions you normally have. So I'll let you guys take the lead, and I'll just try and be the best coach-y that I can.
Sage, do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
You could start.
So how I typically start things off after a race is I just want to learn about your experience. I already know some of it, and I watched your videos on the race, but just at least a quick summary of how you felt, even the days before the race and then during the race itself.
Yeah, I think that in the days leading up to the race, a lot of people are like, oh, so is it going to be a big PR attempt kind of day? You're feeling ready, that kind of thing. And, I got that question a lot. I got it the week of London. I got it the week of Boston, the week before that too, because I've been just getting to see so many people. And the whole time in Boston, I was like, I'm not ready for that yet, but mentally I'll be there. By next week I'll be ready. I'm still easing into the idea of the work that needs to be done and that kind of thing. And then by the time we got to London, it was more like, I guess I'm going to have to be ready. So yeah, I'll be ready, because I'm going to send it. And so I guess I got to be ready. And so that's kind of what I was feeling from the mental perspective of I still need to spend some time mentally preparing. And I knew I mentally wasn't quite there yet. And so I was constantly well, at some point I'll sit down and have some time to kind of think about it. I'm not really quite sure I got there mentally, but also I'm some part of me is I don't know if I was really there physically either. I'm not sure if I was in the right spot, but so it just kind of felt kind of timid a little bit, I think is the best way. I think just timid is the best way. I was scared of the PR. I was scared of the race. Is kind of the best way I can kind of put my headspace. for what I was feeling the weeks leading up to it.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, I'm just jotting like notes down because I'm going to use like everything you're saying now for the future. So we can so hopefully before you do a marathon again, like these are the things that we can work on.
Yeah, so that's just looking at the mental side, which is obviously huge because it manifests itself with the physical feelings. And, it's a bit of an unusual timing of events, I think, for you going to Boston the week before and getting all that adrenaline. Obviously not racing Boston, but working really hard, doing a lot of events and filming and interacting. And it's kind of makes it a roller coaster of emotion, so to speak, because you get all the excitement of Boston and then you got your own race at London. And it's like, that's a lot going on. And just with your line of work, traveling a lot, filming a lot, being around running events, trying on different shoes all the time, it's a little different from like a person that we coach that works a different job. A lot of people have, full-time jobs, they have family obligations, but they don't do exactly what you do. So it's kind of a unique situation. And I think, like Sandi said, there's a lot of mental notes to take note for the future. And, first of all, congrats on the finish and getting that star and, gutting it out on a tough day. I know that's always really hard to do. And, we'll look at the physical side of training too, but sometimes you have to take one step back before you could take two steps forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, related to that is I've done, busy weeks before a race. Like, I've traveled further, to get to a race. I've dealt with bigger time zone shifts and things like that to get to a race, and have been able to race well. And in my mind, I didn't feel like I was doing like that much more, but I feel, looking back at it, I'm like, oh, I did do kind of a lot. And I'm more of like an introverted person too. And so like for me, like spending a lot of days, even if it was a week before, spending a lot of days just like meeting people all day, is very, very draining. And so I feel like, maybe I should have kind of been a little bit more self-aware in terms of like how much of a drain that could put on to my system. And I think the other thing is like, I was like, well, I'll have a couple of days in London that'll be really quiet before everyone starts kind of arriving. And I'll recover from my Boston, a non-racing Boston, but still a busy week then. But in reality, I was working like crazy trying to get Boston video content done too. So the time that I thought I would spend kind of recovering and relaxing, I guess I did not spend recovering and relaxing. So I think that certainly had more of an effect than I wanted to give it credit. Because I was just like, I like to work. I like to meet people. I like to say yes to things, and so I just didn't want to like turn down potential opportunities. And I felt like I was being pretty measured while I was in London, but that Boston week was pretty rigorous. And so I think that took a bigger toll than I realized it would.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I'm the same way. Like I love to work. I love chatting with people, but I'm an introvert too. And so like, as much as I love it, like I've learned I have to be careful in the days leading up to the race. So that sometimes you need to experience what not to do to learn what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say, looking at your email notes, you had mentioned something about, carb loading and glycogen stores and like, forgetting maybe to get a meal in at a opportune time because you're so busy, you're running around, you're traveling internationally, changing time zones, and then, if you're skipping meals or you forget to eat, as well as hydrate, that could also be a pretty critical thing, as well as sleep. We could look at, there's a multitude of variables, and, there's also, the physical training where, you hired us as coaches and it's a new training system. And sometimes that takes a little longer to adapt to as well. But yeah, there's, I think, lots of variables at play. What do you think, Sandi?
I'm trying to think what to start with. I will say like one note I had just written down, going into another race or another marathon, I do want to make sure that like you have races and workouts that really build your confidence. because I feel like some of the long run workouts we had you do, they probably they weren't the confidence builders we hoped for. So I think that's like a goal. And I think it's important to have like multiple goals, like going to different training cycle. But one goal I have for you is to have those big workouts and actually get confidence from them. And yeah, I want to talk about everything Sage said, and like you had mentioned in email too. But I guess before getting into that, a good place to start would be like, how did you feel like during the race? What did you feel like? What was happening?
Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much right away, it felt hard, and so I was like, this should feel pretty easy, because we were running, I think, 650s out of the gate. And I was like, this should feel fine. And I was like, this doesn't feel fine. It doesn't feel hard. It doesn't feel like I'm running like a half marathon effort right now. But I'm like, okay. But I was just like, you know what? Maybe I just need to warm up into it. Maybe it's just jitters. And the big thing I was trying to do is not look at my watch at all. And I was running with two other people. And we were all thinking like, we'll like kind of like take it easy while there's a little bit more traffic and just kind of run, what feels like right around like 650-ish pace. And so I looked at the watches to make sure we weren't going too fast. But I tried not to look at like heart rate or anything, and just been like, you know what, just look at the people around you, find a pack and just start kind of just running. And so the first 5K was fine, but like it didn't feel great like right away. And then by the end of the second 5K, about 10K, I was like, even these 650s feel hard. And so I let my other two friends go. And I just started to drop back thinking like, I just need to maybe reset a little bit and just run by myself a little bit more. And, maybe go even a little bit slower than 650s. Cause I'm like, if I'm feeling good at the end of the race, these handful of seconds at the beginning aren't going to make a difference. So I was just like, let's chill out just a little bit, and try to regroup. But then like, I was having a hard time holding on to like sub sevens. It felt like, so I was just like, I think I was still maybe running 650s, but like, it just felt really hard at like by 15K. And at that point I was just like, this is not a good day. This is not going to work out. And so I was already just like trying to think of like, all right, well, maybe we can just salvage a sub 3. And so let's work on like running just 650s. And that's what it's going to be for the rest of the day. But then by like 20K, I was like, that's not going to happen today either. And by 20K, I was just like, if I didn't need this star, I would stop. Because I'm not even halfway and I feel terrible. So I was just like, everything was just hard. And I don't really know how to explain that. But, I think I didn't look at my heart rate until 15K, maybe at 10K. Because I don't know if I ever had the conversation with you guys or if I had a conversation with someone else and they were like, did it feel hard because your heart rate was high, or did you look and see a high heart rate number and then it felt hard? And so I was just trying to like, don't look at the heart rate number, because I'm pretty good at like, you figure out your watch and you know which side the heart rate is on, and you kind of like try to like block your eyes from seeing the heart rate number. So I was trying to just focus on just checking in on the pace every once in a while to see what that was. But even then, try not to look at the watch too much and just trying to figure out what the rhythm I should be running is. And I was just having a hard time the whole time. So by the time I crossed Tower Bridge and we got to like the halfway point, I was like, I don't even know if like a BQ, which is 310 for me, is it in the cards for today? And by 25K or something like that, I was just like, I don't even know if I'm going to finish. This is really hard. So like it went downhill. It started out not great, and then it went downhill real fast.
Well, I will say, like, you did a lot of things right by like noticing it was too hard and backing off. Like that's exactly what you should do. And like, you kind of know what could like trigger you to like feel more stressed, and you try not to do that. So like, and honestly, I can tell by like your heart rate data on Strava that like you fought for it, and you try to run as smart as you could for the day. So Sage, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I know one thing we wanted to talk about, like why, like your heart rate was higher than it should have been. And like, I expect heart rate to be a little bit higher on race day just because of like the excitement of a race, but it shouldn't have been as high as it was.
Yeah, like from the gun, it was alarmingly high. And that's probably better that you didn't look at it. When I race, I actually turn my heart rate thing off. I have it record later for after the fact, but I don't even want to see what it is because it's like the effort on the day, like that's what it's going to be. And, you know, I monitor pace, but your heart rate, yeah, it was surprisingly high from the start, given the pace. And then cadence was surprisingly low. The stride rate, I was surprised you were only like in the 160s. And usually we like to see people at least high 170s, which I think you were in most of the workouts. But sometimes underlying fatigue could also cause that, as well as the stress. And, you know, another thing of note in your email, you said you felt cold, like you got cold. Usually it's hot weather marathons, or when it's like humid out, people have an elevated heart rate because they're too hot. But if you're getting cold and the muscles are shutting down, then it's like your whole body, all the systems are just working extra hard. And I know you also didn't maybe feel as comfortable in, you'd mentioned the shorts you were wearing, or you like wearing half tights maybe instead, especially if it's cold. And that could be, you know, another thing we look into. But like Sandi said, with the elevated heart rate, it shows that, you know, there was already some stress going into the race, that I would have liked to see that heart rate a lot lower, at least for the first half. But you could tell you were fighting all the way.
Yeah. And so like with the cold thing, like I just didn't pack well for London. I just thought the temperatures would be, I mean, look, you know, I'd packed like, you know, a week and a half ago. And so like I had no like actual weather data forecast to go off of. So I just kind of looked at, you know, historic, what is it normally like in April in London? And so I'd packed some things, but like I guess I did not pack enough warm layers, and I didn't wear enough warm layers. And so like the whole week I was just a little bit on the chilly side. I thought it'd be fine, but you know, as I was running the race, I was like, this feels really hard, and I don't know why. And part of me is like, am I sick? Do I have a cold? I thought that might be it, you know. And I was really nervous that like, I was like, well, I have whole nother trip that I have to go on from London. So I'm like, I really hope I'm not sick. And I never like really felt super like ill, you know, in terms of like a sickness or anything. But I don't know if there was just something like a little bit underlying. Like I'd met like 1,000 people over the last, you know, week. And so it's just like, you know, it's a lot of hands to shake and people to be around. And, you know, a lot of those people are, you know, coming in through a taper from a hard marathon training block. And so not everyone's always in 100% like health. And so I was like a little bit concerned that might be it. And it, you know, and I feel like if I had like after the race all of a sudden became like, you know, very, very ill, that would have made a lot of sense from the heart rate perspective, you know. And maybe there was something like low grade going on, but I also did feel really cold the morning of the race. I brought my throwaway layers and they were, you know, warm enough, but maybe I should have brought even warm. I brought very thin warm throwaway layers because I was packing for such a big trip, and like just space in the suitcase was at a premium. And so like, you know, this is what I brought, so this is what I'll wear. And so like, I just felt a little bit on the chilly side to start. And even when we started running, I felt chilly. I sweated during the race, but I never really felt hot during the race. You know, usually at some point during marathon, you're like, I want to take some of this water and dump it on myself, you know, because it was a cool day. It was like 50 degrees for a race temp. So like almost ideal racing conditions on a fast course. It should have been great, but like at no point did I feel like I wanted to like dump water on myself. So like I was just cold the whole time. And I don't think it wasn't a clothes issue. So I think there's all something, you know, that was going on with my body there that kind of, you know, may make sense on a small enough level to have made a big difference when you're trying to run a fast marathon.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even just like being cold, like that will raise your heart rate a little bit because your body's like trying to keep itself warm. But when being cold, like it takes energy from you. Mm-hmm. So all that, it kind of makes sense. What I kind of get with you is like, it's not just one thing that probably like made for a rough day. It kind of sounds like you just kind of had multiple things going on.
Yeah, and back
Yeah.
to, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds right. I mean, it's like on the one hand, like that, I think that's what it is because there wasn't one. It's not like, my hip gave out or anything like that. Which would be easier to kind of, diagnose or troubleshoot. But it's just I think that it was a lot of those little things together. And like with the shorts, like the shorts were great, but and I'd run with them before on longer runs. It's just I think I don't know if it's just preference or what, but I think I'm a half tights guy. And I just felt like with the split shorts for running a marathon, I just felt like my thighs there's just too much flopping around happening. And I was just like, oh, I really miss the compression of the half tights right now. And so that's just like another little thing. And, it's, part of me is like, it sounds like I'm just, searching for an excuse of why I just had a bad day. But, and I don't know, but hopefully some of this is helpful for other people too. Is just like, these are little things to hopefully not obsess over, but, just to kind of make sure you're, being a little bit more mindful than I was of, and kind of just taking care of yourself before you're trying to make a big effort.
Yeah, so that reminds me, the other thing we go through with our checklist with athletes is usually just looking at like baseline general health parameters. So we want to make sure you're healthy and happy mentally, physically, and that goes back to like maybe getting blood work done. Because even if you're eating an ideal healthy diet all the time, training's really demanding. You're running 80-mile weeks. We trained you really hard. Like we definitely pushed the envelope on that. So if you're off with anything, be it say vitamin D or iron or common things, sometimes you could see that, or an underlying infection, even like spike in the white blood cell count, or even like kidney, liver function, stuff like that. We like to look at the science and the blood test results, someone just to make sure that you're not deficient on any mineral or vitamin that might affect your energy levels. Because like a lot of people, for example, are kind of low on vitamin D, especially in the northern hemisphere coming off the winter, and that could definitely affect how you feel and how you perform in races and workouts. I'm not saying that's the case for you, but that's definitely something we look at like on the physical side, as well as going back into training and being like, okay, maybe, we ran him pretty hard. Maybe it just didn't quite kick in yet.
Well, I guess on that note, one thing else you had mentioned is like your meal planning and carb loading before the race. So I would like to hear more about what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So I just thought that I would, it's London. There's going to be places to eat everywhere I go. And I thought I would just always kind of like duck in somewhere, grab some food and like eat it on the way to wherever was next. But I think that the problem with that plan is, and also I thought that like, everywhere I go, there'll be like snacks because it's, a marathon weekend event. And so like there'll be, bagels or donuts or coffee and other things to eat. But like I know this is like when I go to an event, I don't eat at the event because I'm always trying to meet people and say hi to people. And so like if you're just like holding food, it makes it hard to do that. And so I tend to like forget to eat there. And then by the time I'm ready to eat, like the food's, gone or the event's over. And then for a trip like London, which I hadn't been to London in a long time. And so I was trying to do a lot of filming every time I was like en route from one place to another. And so like my plan of like always having a water bottle and always having something to eat in my hand was harder because I had cameras in my hand the whole time. And so like, I think I needed to be more like disciplined on that and be like, no, I need to spend like 20 minutes after the event or before the event, making sure I stop and get something to eat. Cause I'm always running a little bit late too. And so it's like the first thing to go is like, the extra kind of snack time. So like that was something that I didn't really do. And then at the end of the day, I'd be like, all right, day's over, it's carb loading time. So like, let's get 2 dinners and then I'd eat 2 dinners and then go to bed. But like eating 2 dinners is a lot, but not if you haven't eaten a good breakfast and a good lunch. So, like rookie mistakes, stuff that I really shouldn't have done. So I think that I just need to overall be more mindful of where I tend, like I know what to do for carb loading. And I just need to be more aware of what are the pitfalls for me in terms of carb loading is just like, I'm not intentional with my time in terms of it. I just feel like, oh, I'm in carb loading mode. I'll just eat every time I see food. And I have to schedule time to eat. I think is going to be the big takeaway for me.
Yeah. And so like, I know like every race is going to be different, but I think before your next marathon, or even like we should try this before like shorter races, if you do any before, is like we'll actually write down like a meal plan, because I feel like once we like write something down, then you feel a bit more committed to it. And I'm also like writing down a bunch of notes from today, and I'm gonna make you like a little personalized checklist of what to do before your next race, so that way you can like even feel good at just about like checking things off going into the next one.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Sandy. And like with my history, like I have a very strict final 48 hours before the race, and it's like, okay, the morning of the race, like I wake up 3 to 4 hours before the start of the race. I eat a bagel with peanut butter and half a banana, and I drink, this much, 32 ounces of electrolyte fluid. And so like, yeah, just staying on top of the hydrating and nutrition, or having a plan written out or a checklist, like Sandy said, is real key. And I know it's harder for you because you're traveling a lot with all these different events, different time zones. So the meal planning gets really hard, like with the exact timing, but it's definitely, you don't want to be skipping meals going into a long distance race. And going back with like general nutrition and diet and hydration, like how would you say, even the week before at Boston, was the same sort of thing happening where maybe your eating schedule got off, or you weren't eating enough, or weren't staying hydrated enough, would you say?
Yeah, I think I probably did better in Boston than I did in London. Because even though I had more events to do in Boston, but even then, I do think that I was kind of like skimping on breakfast a little bit because I was running late, and then lunch would be at a very off hour because a lot of events would be at lunch, and so like there was a lot of that stuff still happening. The kind of like nice thing was, so like I was working with like a videographer, and I was just always try to make sure after every event that we did together, where he was helping me with some footage, I would always make sure we would go out to eat, and so I can buy him dinner or buy him lunch, So like those were times when we definitely ate. I'm good at making sure other people eat, but I was bad at making sure that I was eating, and so I have to think of myself more a little bit, I think, when it comes to that. So even the week before, it was probably better eating than I ate in London, but again, it was already starting back then.
Yeah, and then with hydration, like I know I'd probably have struggled with this a bit. There'd be a lot of free beer or drinks involved too, so sometimes that could dehydrate you. I don't know if you were having beer or a lot of special food items, I should say. No.
Yeah, no, I mean, like there was a couple. I think I had a couple of beers like the week before in Boston. I don't think I ever had more than one a night, I think. Yeah, I don't think so. And then like in London, I wasn't having any beers either because it was just like it was like crunch time, And so I feel like drinks wise, I was being pretty good, pretty responsible. I probably could have used a little bit more fluids, in terms of hydration overall, but I felt like I did a pretty decent job with that, making sure I was drinking water everywhere I could. But again, I probably could do a little bit better in terms of making sure I have, like, if I'm not taking in food calories, taking in calories through my drinks.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Would you say, I don't know if you track anything, other metrics, but like during the training cycle, were there any like big weight fluctuations? I don't know if you keep track of that at all. Like did you lose a lot of weight, or were there weight fluctuations?
Yeah, I don't really keep track of my weight, so I don't think that there were. I may have gained weight for this over like since maybe my last PR, like in Tokyo, because I started doing weight training. At least I like to think that I gained some weight. That could be like the only thing, but I don't think there was anything drastic or dramatic.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, what I'm getting is like there's probably a bunch of little things that made you not feel as good as you possibly could have on race day. But I still think like the question is like, was it going to be, even if you did everything right, was it going to be like a PR day anyway? And so like that's what I want to get into like this next training cycle is like, how do we, like, I do think it's good to like see like, okay, this is what we did well the last training cycle, but I do think it like we could approach things a little bit differently this time. Because again, I'm going back to like a big goal is like, I want you to have even like shorter races or workouts where you just feel like you nail these big workouts or shorter races, whatever, and have that confidence going in. Because that's just something we didn't achieve this past cycle. And I think it's because like you had this goal and we wanted to help you hit this goal, but we were approaching it from like, let's do some big long runs at your goal pace, which is good. And it was needed to like go for it. And sometimes you have to do that when you have a goal, like it's like, let's just see what happens. But another way to approach it would be like, let's meet you more where you're at right now and see like if we could build up from there. So like for like marathon paced workouts, instead of like going for like closer to goal marathon or like something like that, you know, we won't just say like hit this pace. It's more like, okay, based off of your recent workouts or the last race you did, let's start you off from there and try to like build up. And like, so just like a little bit, it's a little different approach, could make a big difference, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, I thought about like, what tweaks do we need to do, from this kind of build to the next one that we do, and I found myself instantly like, oh, well, maybe we need to do more of this and less of this. And I'm like, oh, I just rewrote my plan that I always do. So I'm like, that defeats the whole purpose of us working together if I'm just going to be like, hey, I want you to give me the workouts that I would always give myself. So part of me is thinking like, all right, well, I can't just keep falling back into kind of like, well, what worked before, so like I'm keeping in mind that like, well, like I'm comparing kind of like the best of where I brought myself and what we're at now is like part one of like a multi-part rebuilding phase, and like Sage was saying, you got to take 2 steps back to move forward. I feel like that's where we're at, where it's like, when we started, you guys were like, well, there's a gap in some of your PRs, and it's not just for vanity's sake that we want you to run some faster races. It's because we need you to get strong, and we want you to be faster. So that way you'll have that strength going into the marathon later. And so I feel like I see that vision. I understand that, and so I'm like, all right, I'm not going to come in and be like, hey, these are the things we need to change because this was what worked with me before. But like, I do think that like some of the things that we did, I do have some thoughts of like, all right, well, here's how I can feel more confident, and so like I do have some, things like that where I'm like, if we can spend a little bit more time with me, like whatever a marathon effort feels like, I feel like just knowing, all right, this is normal. This is what it should feel like. And sometimes the pace is fast and sometimes it's not. And it's always going to be representative of what my fitness is that day. And so I do a lot of, long runs at like marathon effort. And then I don't care what the pace is. And hopefully over time that pace speeds up and gets, so like what I would always do is go like, goal times are great, but really you just want to get as fit as you can. And then hopefully you're fitter than the goal time. And hopefully it all works out. It's kind of a very ambiguous way of training, but I think that that's kind of like helps me feel confident. And I'm like, all right, if all else, like it's not even a confidence thing. I'm trying to transcend the time, I'm like, I don't care about times. I just want to run as fast as I can, is kind of how I've approached it before as well. And so like that was an adjustment for me in this block of like trying to figure out like, all right, this is 6 seconds faster than half marathon pace. What does that mean? Like I don't, so I'm like physiologically what's happening, like, so I was a lot of times trying to figure some of that out. And, so that's an adjustment for me and I'm still kind of getting used to that. But, in terms of what builds confidence for me, like, I think like having like just knowing, like I've been here before, I know this, like that's what makes me feel familiarity, I guess, is what gives me confidence.
Yeah. And that's really important to consider so we can build it in. And you said exactly what I had like written down and underlined like multiple times is that we'll still kind of do workouts as we did, but I do think we should do more workouts by effort for a while. Like exactly like what you're kind of saying, especially like, Chicago or I know you don't live exactly in Chicago. I can't remember, but like, it can get humid and hot in summer, and that's going to slow your paces down anyway. And so like, it's a nice time to like, as it heats up, to learn to go by effort a little bit more and get back to that. Go ahead, Sage.
Yeah, I mean, generally in this type of scenario with a lot of athletes, we'd say, okay, now we're going to step back from the marathon and we're going to work on maybe getting PRs at shorter distances. So, I think you could lower all your PRs, first of all, by quite a bit. But, 5K, 10K, even that half marathon time, they could all come down. And I think that would give you a lot of confidence as well as variety in training, lower mileage, more speed work focus, lighter stuff. And then you transition back into a marathon build and you just extend that speed endurance, so to speak. Because, you keep referencing, it's just 6 seconds faster than my half marathon time. We want your half marathon PR to be, 122. So you got to be thinking in the future, like, I'm a 122 guy, not a 124, 125 guy. So then when that half marathon threshold pace gets lowered, you're doing workout 6 seconds a mile faster than half marathon pace. That's basically right at lactate threshold or tempo. So there's a lot of benefits in that intensity realm. And then over time, it makes your efficiency at marathon pace feel a lot more smooth and more comfortable, basically. So, it makes those 640 miles feel more effortless, so to speak, especially if you get that half marathon pace down to 620 per mile. So that's kind of the idea. But it does take time. And, when I got out of college, I went pro with Hanson's Brooks and rode marathons and half marathons. And my whole first several months there was a disaster. I did all the training. I worked really hard. I followed their coaching to a T. They're great coaches. They got me to PR, but it just took a couple misses before I could do really well. My first big race was Boston, actually, on a perfect weather day. And I just totally tanked way off my college PR. And I thought, I was overtraining, but it just took a little extra for that training to kick in. And all the hard work you did over the last 2 to 3 months, that's going to pay dividends in the future. So you didn't get paid at London, you'll get paid in the future. It'll pay off. So it's worth it to keep grinding. I know it's hard sometimes. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand that. And that's kind of where I am mentally too. On this is that the whole reason for getting coaching is that I wanted to figure out what I wasn't doing and explore things that I wasn't already doing. And I knew it would be, kind of disorienting in a lot of ways. And it would take time for the body to adjust and really adapt to it. And I always think of marathon training is not something that PRs don't come in a single block. Is generally how I feel about it. It takes a couple of times and you can't usually rush it. It takes time for the work to happen and it to absorb. And, I think for me, because I've been doing it a slightly different way for a long time, it's going to take me a little while to kind of come around and respond to it too. So, I would have loved to have run faster for you guys because you guys have put so much work into this as well. But it'll happen. I think I'm gonna need more time, and in the meantime, I do look forward to running some shorter distances over the summer. One, because I don't like summer running that much. It's just too hot. I don't do well in the heat, So I'm like, all right, well, maybe this is a good time to try some, really short stuff, and work on some of those other things when it's the heat. It's not going to be as big a deal. To run, shorter intervals than it will be trying to do an 18-mile long run, which can be, for me, pretty miserable to do when it's too hot. So I'm looking to switch it up, well, I've got a 50K this weekend, but after that, then short, fast stuff, I'm looking forward to, more feeling disoriented and trying new things and kind of working on all those times. To get to that point where, all right, those 640s will feel easy. because of this different kind of strength work, speed work that we're doing, and then, kind of like finishing it off with some marathon specific training, at the end, So I see kind of like where you guys you're laying it out, and I'm on board.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a great plan. I also just think it's like a nice way to keep things fun. Like just to like have like a big change and do something else a little bit. Like I always like that, especially for marathoners, to just change it up every now and then.
Awesome. Do you have any more questions?
No, I think that's pretty much all the questions, and I think we've kind of covered all the things that I think like the audience would want to know in terms of what was going on in my head on the day, and kind of like my thoughts of that day, but also like over the last training block as well. So I feel like that's been a pretty good synopsis. And for everyone else to know, like, Sage and Sandy and I will keep working together. We'll have some fun stuff planned. We'll have to get on another call so we can start planning which 5Ks and 10Ks to kind of try to figure out to put on my calendar. There's a lot of travel this summer. We were talking about a little bit off camera. So we'll have to figure out a way to do that as well. But then, the next marathon is going to be in Berlin. So it's sooner, probably, again, another shorter and too soon for what you guys would ideally like. But that's what's on my calendar next. So sorry.
We'll make it work. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, everyone else that's watching. If you want to start talking to Sage and Sandy, they're at Higher Running. You guys know where to find them, and I'll make sure that the links are in the description. Sage and Sandy, thanks so much again for your time, and thanks for the coaching for this last block. And I look forward to the next couple blocks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we love working with you and look forward to continuing this in the future.